Hey, welcome to the investor.bet AFL Round 11 betting trends preview. Here, we're going to go through all the games coming up this weekend and look at them from a specifically betting perspective. So we're going to run through the trends and the history between the matchups. Going to go through some of the stats of how these teams match up against each other. And I'm going to go through who I think is going to win the games, why, and what I'm leaning towards betting on in these games. Everything I do, if you've watched any of the videos previously, is all based on statistics. So how this year we're going at over 60% on our AFL bets, that's all based on statistics and situational data. Everything that I use to research games is included in the Bet Finders, which is included with the AFL Best Bets membership. The link to that is in the description. But I want to show you guys how you can go through, analyze games using information that effectively the betting companies don't really want you to have access to. The reason I built a lot of the tools that I have for the AFL and other sports as well is so that I can analyze games in a way using information that's not typically available or easily accessible in a way that allows you to consume that information and then make decisions based off it. Because it's one thing just seeing the stats. Like you can see that a team averages this many points or they have this many inside 50s, etc., etc. But how can you use that information to then decide how you're going to bet based off that? And that's specifically what these tools are designed to help you do. Really excited to go through. There's some really good games coming up this weekend, particularly the first one, and that is Geelong at home to the Western Bulldogs. Geelong a favourite, $1.82. 2.5 points is the handicap, and the total right now is 177.5. Geelong come into this matchup off a really good win last week, beating Port Adelaide 115-39. They have now won 5 of their last 7 games. The week prior to that, though, they were at home and lost to GWS, who are another side who have a good record at going down to Geelong and winning. That same thing applies to the Western Bulldogs, who've gone to GMHBA Stadium and won their last 2 meetings there. Last time was round 19, 2024, and the Bulldogs won 95-48, and then they also won there in round 24 in 2023, 104-79. One of those games was as an underdog, one was as a favourite. Here, there's not a great deal between them. So this venue doesn't hold any fears for the Bulldogs like it may do for other teams, and the Western Bulldogs come to this winning 4 of their past 5 games. They've scored 113 or more in 4 of those 5 games. The only miss up in Darwin against the Gold Coast Suns, where they lost by 10 points and scored 96. Bulldogs are your number 1 scoring side so far this season, averaging just under 104 points a game. Geelong averaging just over 97, so both top 4 attacking sides, and the Western Bulldogs are the slightly stronger defensive side. So for me personally, I think the Bulldogs should be favourite here. I think Geelong are mostly priced on this being a home. Both these sides are coming off big wins last week, like the Bulldogs coming off a 91-point win against Essendon and Geelong coming off a 76-point win against Port Adelaide. The issue I also have with Geelong as well is that the week prior, that loss to GWS where they conceded 105 points. GWS were awful the week following that, so last weekend when they played Fremantle, they lost that game 95-61, only managed 61 points. And like when you look through GWS's overall form, that 105 points they scored against Geelong, that's the only time they've scored over 81 since round 5 against St Kilda, so across their past 5 games. So I think the Bulldogs can go down there and win this game, like them as an underdog here. From a total perspective, 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone over. The last matchup at this venue, the total was 160.5, which is a really low number. And now we've got a 17-point higher total for this game, which is higher than, almost 10 points higher than any of the last 5 meetings between these two sides. The way these teams score, I can definitely see it going over the total. Both are fairly strong defensively. One thing you also want to pay attention to is efficiency numbers, and both these teams are ranked 1 and 2 in scoring shots per inside 50. So if they can continue those kind of numbers, and the Bulldogs in terms of defensive efficiency numbers aren't quite as good. So I think we'll see a game that goes very close to going over this number. If it were to go under, it's not going to go under by much. Essendon versus Richmond. Essendon $1.36 favourites, minus 18.5, which does seem a little bit crazy for a team coming off a 91-point loss last week. But it is against Richmond. The total is 163.5. For me, Essendon they're putting wins on the board. They have won 6 of their past 8 games, but have failed to cover 4 of their last 5. And statistically, they're better than Richmond. They're slightly better attack, slightly better defense. But as a whole, there's not a great deal between them. And I do think they're a little bit short here at the current prices. Like, I definitely wouldn't be laying 18.5 points on them. The thing is, though, with Essendon, whilst they have a good record, they've won 5 games, they've only lost 4 so far this season. If they were to lose this game, that puts them at 5-5 on the season, compared to winning and being at 6-4. And then when you look ahead following this game, they play Brisbane, Carlton, Geelong, and Fremantle leading up to their bye, and then have Gold Coast after the bye. Those 5 games are all going to be tough matches for Essendon, particularly considering the Fremantle game, which is the one that you would say is the most evenly matched team to Essendon. That game's over in Perth. So following this, they really could go 1-4, maybe even 0-5. And to me, this game is a must-win for Essendon, still obviously early on in the season. And I think that'll just get them over the line. I think the other way you can approach betting on this game is from a disposals perspective. Essendon ranked number 2 in disposals and number 1 in uncontested possession. So if teams let them get plenty of ball, then they'll use plenty of it. And Richmond give up the most disposals and also the most uncontested possessions to the opposition. Second most kicks, most handballs. Essendon will have plenty of the ball here. You can look at their player markets, look at some disposals. There should be some good opportunities to find in there. I think Essendon probably win, but there's no real value in the price, and definitely look into some player props. The total at 163.5, 7 of the past 10 between these two sides have gone under. Essendon, 6 of their last 7 games have gone under the total. Richmond, their last 6 games have gone under the total. Hence the reason why we've got such a low number for this game. Statistically, this number, from how these teams are performing, is down into the 150s. So I'd lean towards the under, even though it is a very low number. But would prefer a slightly greater total to be more confident in the under, as it is definitely a low number. But it is the same as what it was last time these sides met, and that game went under the total as well. So leaning towards the under overall. Carlton versus GWS. Really good game, this one. Carlton, small favourites, $1.85, 1.5 point favourites. The total is 168.5. Carlton come into this game losing last week against the Sydney Swans at the SCG. They're back at home. This is their last game before they have the bye. They have won 4 of their past 6 games overall, so they've started to turn their season around. But this is a pivotal game for them going into the bye. If they were to drop this game, they're now 4-7 overall in the season, and it starts to become a bit of a long way back from there. And GWS also losing last week. That means they've now lost 4 of their last 5 games. They sit at 5-5 overall. Where these teams are at right now, this is an important game for both of them. So there's a lot on the line here, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if it were to be a fairly close game. Last season, they met twice. GWS won by 12 at home, and Carlton won their home game by 19. I really think this is your perfect try-bet game, where either side to win by up to 4 goals really seems to fit the criteria. In terms of statistics, in attack, they're fairly evenly matched. GWS's numbers overall are slightly better. However, GWS haven't scored over 81 points in any of their past 5 games. The only exception, the 105 they scored against Geelong. 61 points against Fremantle, 73 against the Swans, 81 against the Western Bulldogs, and 34 against the Adelaide Crows. Against Carlton, who currently rank number 2 in points conceded, and they also give up the least number of opponent shots on goal. This is a little bit of a challenge here for GWS, who haven't been their best going forward lately, and that's why I think neither of these sides are going to win this game in a blowout. Carlton generally get on top early, lead during the first half. They're the number 1 side in first quarters. GWS are pretty good as well, but second halves, Carlton ranked pretty poorly. They're only winning 30% of third quarters and 40% of fourth quarters. So I think even if Carlton are up a little bit, GWS can come back and close the margin. Don't think there's going to be too much separating these two sides. Off current form, I'd slightly lean towards Carlton, but I think it's a little bit risky backing them to win the game. You could look at taking them for the first half, probably the better betting option. Total for this game is 168.5. Past 3 head-to-head between these two sides have gone over the total. GWS this season have had a bit of a mixture. Their last 6 games, 3 have gone over, 3 have gone under. But Carlton this year, only one game has gone over the total, which was against North Melbourne, where they scored 153 points themselves. Their last 4 have gone under, and overall on the season, 9 of their 10 games have gone under the total. This is a little bit of a tricky one because we've got 2 top 4 defenses going against each other. So in that situation, I generally lean towards the under, especially considering both teams have had a little bit of scoring issues, particularly GWS. If they were to turn it on suddenly in this game, then it would definitely go over this number. But as it currently stands, I'd lean towards the under, but a little confidence just because the past 3 meetings between these sides have all gotten, the last 2 last season both cleared 200 points. And for that reason, I'm probably staying away from the total in this game. Hawthorn versus Brisbane, another really, really good game. Hawthorn favourites $1.58, minus 9.5. The total is 172.5. Hawthorn lost last week against the Gold Coast Suns up in Darwin. They've had extended rest coming into this game, playing on the Thursday night, and Brisbane played on the Sunday. It's a significant advantage here for Hawthorn in terms of days rest. However, they do have to travel back from Darwin. Brisbane, shortish turnaround for them. However, and they also do have to travel. So I think in terms of rest advantages, it definitely lies with the Hawks in this game. Hawthorn have won and covered the past 5 versus Brisbane, all of those at home. Brisbane last beat the Hawks back in 2019, and Hawthorn have won all 3 meetings historically against the Lions at the MCG, where this game will be played. As mentioned, Hawthorn lost last week against the Gold Coast Suns. Prior to that, though, they were playing really well, winning 3 straight. But they did beat Melbourne, Richmond, and West Coast. So fairly weak opposition. All 3 of those sides ranked in the bottom 4 of the ladder when Hawthorn played them. And this little period here for Hawthorn is a challenge. So they lost to the Gold Coast last week. They'll play Brisbane, Collingwood, and the Western Bulldogs following this. I think this is a game that is important. Hawthorn grabbed the win. They have a good record against Brisbane. Brisbane aren't playing that well at the moment. They lost last week against Melbourne, run over the top by a Melbourne side that has struggled to score. They ranked 16th in points scored going into that game, and Brisbane conceded 99 against them. So against the Hawks side, who ranks 5th in points scored and 3rd defensively, numbers lie with Hawthorn here. And a week prior to that, drew with North Melbourne down in Tasmania. Brisbane, whilst they do have a 7-win record on the season, 7 wins, 2 losses and a draw, they've only covered the spread 3 times from their 10 games. So when they're winning, they're only just getting over the line majority of the time. Struggling to score a little bit lately. Hawthorn can shut them down, and I think we'll get the win. Total is 172.5. 4 of the past 5 between these sides have gone over. Last time they met at the MCG, it was 173.5 total. That game went under the total, so that's been the only one of the last 5 to go under. Though with 172.5 being the number, I'd have a slight lean towards the over. I think this number is 2 points lower than it really should be. Hawthorn coming to this game last week going over. They've had an even mixture. Both sides have an even mixture of games going over and under, but purely based off statistical numbers, slight lean towards the over. North Melbourne versus Collingwood, big favourites, $1.13, minus 35.5, and the total is 174.5. Collingwood expected to win this game purely based off the odds. They won last week by 10 points over the Crows. They now sit at 8-2 overall on the season. One thing you always want to look at is who sides have following this. So what's their game after this one in the next couple of weeks? But particularly the game after, because sometimes when teams have what on paper looks like easy matches, if they have a tricky opponent the week after, they might have one eye looking already ahead to that game when Collingwood will play Hawthorn after this match. So there is that little bit of a chance Collingwood may take North lightly here with more of a focus on Hawthorn after this, see if they can get that win over the Hawks. But on form, Collingwood are well and truly the team to beat, probably deserving of the current price. North Melbourne coming to this after getting their 2nd win of the season last week. They now have 2 wins, a draw, and 7 losses through their first 10 games. And after this, they have the bye, which means they can throw everything they possibly can at Collingwood and try and steal this game from them at Marvel Stadium as well. That definitely slightly favours North Melbourne more than if this game was at the MCG, which obviously it should be at Marvel being a North home game. But last week they won at the MCG, but historically don't have a great record there. They don't have a great record at Marvel either, but in terms of them playing better, they generally play better at Marvel. Now, with Collingwood also, their history at Marvel has been filled with a lot of really high-scoring games. So we could see points here. We'll get to that in a second, though. For North Melbourne, last week they beat Richmond by 4 points. Now, they looked like they were going to win that game most of the game, but Richmond did get their noses in front early in the fourth quarter, and North got the lead back. Slightly concerning though, this is a much tougher opponent. Expect Collingwood will win. Don't really want to back them to win by 36 or more points though. I think that's starting to stretch it a little bit. Collingwood have won the past 5 versus North, but North have covered the past 4. And also, it's interesting, I wanted to take note of this when I was doing some of the trends, is considering the line is 35.5, the past 5 meetings have been decided by 35 or less. You could look at Collingwood 1-39 in this game as well as a potential option if you think it'll stay in somewhat of that range. Last season they met round 14 at Marvel, and Collingwood only won by 1 point as a 40.5 point favourite. So see how the bookmakers have adjusted from that game last season, brought the line down a little bit, and over the past 3 meetings, the line has gradually been creeping down from 52.5 to 51.5 to 40, now down to 35.5. Collingwood, though, statistically the better side. You've got Collingwood as the number 1 defensive side going up against North, who ranks 17th points conceded and are ranking in the bottom 6 in majority of defensive metrics. So purely based off that, Collingwood should win. The last 4 head-to-head have gone over the total. The total at 174.5, I think, is 1 to 2 points too high. North, their last 3 games have gone under the total. Collingwood, 4 of their past 6 games have gone over, but are sitting at 5-5 on the season. Based off current form, I'd lean towards the under in this game, but history and the venue suggests it would go over. So this is another game where I don't have a super strong lean on the total. And we're still a few days away from this game being played. Lineups aren't out yet, all that kind of thing. And so there's still plenty of time to make decisions. That's why I post all my final bets in the Best Bets membership. But this video is specifically to go through the trends. Fremantle versus Port Adelaide. Fremantle $1.33 favourites, minus 19.5. And the total is 167.5. Fremantle are a hit and miss side. Like, they go from losing 3 out of 4 games to then coming out beating GWS on the road by 34 points. Important game for them, this one. They currently sit 5 wins, 5 losses, and they have Gold Coast on the Gold Coast after this game. So this is just about must win for Fremantle. If they lose here and then have to go to the Gold Coast to try and win, then there's a good chance they're going to be at 5-7 going into their bye, as opposed to 6-6 or maybe even 7-5 if they were to jag the game against Gold Coast if they drop off after going into next week. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. For this matchup, Fremantle at home should get the win. Like, Port Adelaide having a pretty poor season. They had this little spark with a win over Hawthorn and a close win over the Swans, but outside of that, have been pretty average. They have had 39 and 41 scores in their past 3 weeks and conceded 115 and 131. I think Fremantle will be kicking themselves if they were to lose this game, but Port do have a good record against them. They've won and covered 6 of the past 7. Port Adelaide have also won the past 2 meetings at Optus Stadium, but I think Fremantle will get the job done. If they turn up somewhat near their best, they'll beat Port Adelaide here. Interestingly, 7 of the past 9 between these two teams have been decided by 29 or less, so it's a matchup that has a history of being close. Last season, Port won by 20 points and also won by 3 points in their home game. Fremantle were 7.5 point favourites in the home matchup at the end of last season. They're now 19.5 point favourites. So the adjustment has been done based off Port Adelaide's form. So I don't think there's a huge amount of value with Fremantle. However, I think they'll still win the game. The past 3 head-to-head have gone under. A 167.5 total leans me slightly towards the under, purely based off Port Adelaide's inability to score points. They rank 14th in terms of scoring, but do rank 15th in points conceded. I think with Fremantle being the better attack and better defense, this total largely hinges on Fremantle's ability to score in this game. With that in mind, leaning towards the under, I'd be looking at Port Adelaide's team total to go under, because I think they're the side that's more likely to struggle to score in this game, and I think Fremantle can keep them to a fairly low score like they were able to do to GWS the week prior to that. Did have a couple of high scores conceded against Collingwood and St Kilda, but if you can get a number that's close to 70, maybe even 75 for Port Adelaide. I'd definitely be looking at the under there. Adelaide versus West Coast. The Crows, $1.05, 50.5 point favourites, and the total is 164.5. Adelaide have won the past 5 versus West Coast. They've covered the past 4. And the last 2 meetings between these two sides at the Adelaide Oval, which was round 11 last year and round 13 in 2023, Adelaide outscored West Coast by 311 to 90 points. So 137 to 38 and 174 to 52. So some very big wins by the Crows at home. They also won the last 2 games at Optus as well as over the past few seasons, 123 to 78 and 102 to 86. So they've scored 102 or more in each of the past 4 games. This season, Adelaide were originally the number 1 attacking side. The numbers have dropped off a little bit lately. They've only scored over 100 in 1 of their past 5 games, which was against Carlton. They scored 110 at home, beating them by 60 points. This is an important game for the Crows, and I think they can find a little bit of a percentage boost here. They're sitting at 6-4 overall in the season. They make it 7-4 with a win here. I think they'll do it comfortably and probably will run up a score, assuming conditions are okay in Adelaide on Sunday. West Coast got their first win of the season last week, so it's a bit of a prime letdown spot for them. They did very well to get over the Saints, and Kilda challenged them a little bit in the 4th quarter, but they showed a good fight to make sure they put them away and win the game. They've had a few easy matches recently against St Kilda, Richmond and Melbourne, all sides that rank in the bottom half of the ladder. You could also go back across their past 6 matches. The only real higher quality opposition they face across those 6 has been Hawthorn. So I think this is a much tougher test here against the Crows, and they need to do it on the road. Plus, add in the factor of the letdown spot. I think Adelaide will win it comfortably. 50.5 is an interesting number. I think it is a little bit of a stretch. Like, you're going to need the Crows to score 120 points realistically to ensure they cover this spread and cover it with a bit of comfort. I don't think they're going to keep West Coast to 50, 60 points. I think West Coast should score close enough to 70. Adelaide aren't like a top 2 or top 3 defensive side. They rank 8th in points conceded. And in terms of defensive efficiency, they're still mid-pack. So those numbers do. And in terms of backing Adelaide in this game, I'd be more so looking at their team total to go. We've got a low total here. 6 of the past 7 head-to-head have gone over. Adelaide score plenty against West Coast, and I think we'll likely see this number go over the total, assuming conditions are okay. I haven't checked the weather for this game as of currently, and generally I don't check the weather until a lot closer to the game, or unless I'm really going to bet that game early, mainly due to the fact that it's probably going to be wrong anyway. So at the current number, 164.5, I'd definitely be looking towards the over. West Coast, 3 of their last 4 games have gone over. Adelaide, though, have been a more underside recently. Their last 5 have gone under, but this is a perfect game to buck that trend, especially with such a low number, and a number that's lower than each of the past 4 meetings between the two sides. Melbourne versus Sydney. The Swans, small favourites, $1.85. Another matchup where there's not much between them based off the odds, and the total is 167.5. With the Swans as small favourites on the road here, I do think that's a little bit interesting. Like, Melbourne have won 4 of their past 5 games. They've turned the corner a little bit after losing their first 5. And, like, they haven't been great, but they've been better. And Sydney haven't been great at all this season either. Last time they met at the MCG was round 3, 2023, and Melbourne won by 50 points. So home venue as well in favour of the Demons here. Swans coming to this game winning 2 of their last 3, beating GWS and Carlton, both by fairly small margins. 16 points against Carlton, 15 points against GWS. Dropped the game in the middle against Essendon in their last trip down to Melbourne. This will be the first time playing at the MCG this season for the Swans, so that adds to it a little bit, and it's also will be the first time playing at the MCG since the grand final last year against the Brisbane Lions. So when the Swans turn up there, will that be in the back of their head a little bit? Oh, I guess we'll see. But at the current prices, like, I've been against Melbourne a fair bit this season, but I think this is a winnable game for them, and a game where they can keep their momentum going as well. They've split the past 6 meetings, 3 wins each, so it's not like a strong trend between one side has the record over the opposition either. Sydney, though, have covered 6 of the past 8. But regardless, as underdogs here, I think the value lies with Melbourne. Statistically, there's not much between the two sides. Attack, very little between them. Defense, very little between them. Melbourne are clearly the better clearance side and also get much more of the ball. So I think Melbourne will have more scoring chances. And if they're accurate enough, which is a big question because they're the least accurate side in the competition, but Sydney are the second least accurate. So that kind of cancels each other out. I think Melbourne can get over the line as an underdog. 11 of the past 14 between these sides have gone under the total. The number right now is 167.5, which I think is slightly high. The Swans, 7 of their last 9 games have gone under the total. And for Melbourne, there have been some games going over, some games going under. 4 of their last 7, though, have gone under the total. So slightly a stronger trend towards the under, but I do think at 167.5, the number is a little bit too high. And then final game of the round, St Kilda at home against the Gold Coast Suns. Gold Coast, $1.58 favourites, minus 9.5, and the total is 171.5. St Kilda have now lost 5 of their last 6 games. After starting the season 3-1, they're now sitting at 4-6 overall. So big turnaround there. The only win against Fremantle, which was at Marvel Stadium. They've had last week on the road losing to West Coast. Gold Coast have significantly more rest coming into this game, and St Kilda have to travel back from Perth. So that advantage definitely lies with Gold Coast, even though this is a home game for the Saints. They're just really struggling at the moment. Their numbers is dropping right away. They're now ranked 8th in points for, but 13th in shots and goals, just relying on them being very accurate. And they're facing the number 2 attacking side, who generate the second most shots. I don't think Saints defense is going to be able to hold them up. So the only way St Kilda win this game is if Gold Coast have a little bit of a letdown. The advantage St Kilda have is they've won 9 in the past 10 versus the Suns. However, this is a much different Gold Coast side we're seeing this season. They've only lost the 2 games, so sitting at 7-2 overall on the season. And no team really brings in better form to a game this week than Gold Coast. Last week they beat Hawthorn, and the week prior they beat the Western Bulldogs. And with those kind of form lines, you'd expect they would take care of St Kilda with that alone. So I think there's definitely value in the price for Gold Coast. The one concern is playing at Marvel Stadium. The only time Gold Coast have played there this season was against Richmond, and they lost that game by 11 points. And Richmond, currently a bottom 4 side in the overall league. Gold Coast should have won that game based off how they are playing coming into it, beating the Crows the week prior, beating North Melbourne the week prior to that. But if they handle Marvel Stadium, Gold Coast will win. 9 of the past 11 between these sides have gone under. The number is 171.5. Statistically, you'd lean towards the over here, but it really just depends on Gold Coast scoring. So for me personally, lean towards just taking Gold Coast on the handicap or on the money line, or playing it around that perspective, as opposed to going with the total here. For the numbers, I'd also, instead of playing the full game total, I'd lean towards Gold. If you like the over, for example, I play Gold Coast team total to go over, as opposed to the full game and teams combined to go over. Really good round overall, like some really good matches in here. Really looking forward to it. We're posting all my final bets for this weekend in the AFL Best Bets membership, which you can access through the link in the description. That's where you can also get all the tools to analyze games. And if you want to make money betting on sports, like, you need to have statistics available to analyze, like watch games and then back that up with statistical data. And like the way that I view statistics is I want the statistics to show me in a way where I don't even need to watch the games previously to know how teams performed and know where their strengths and weaknesses are. So it gives you a huge advantage, especially over the typical bettor who's purely betting based off their memory and a bit of their gut feeling of how they've seen teams perform. And a lot of that is weighed in by what they remember from last week. So when you're able to blend together the situational factors, the statistics, and obviously knowing how these teams perform, it gives you a huge advantage over that. And a lot of the time, the betting companies are just preying on people who are betting based off just being a fan. I like to call them like fan bettors. Whereas if you can go into armed with knowledge and tools to research games properly and then make smart strategic bets, then you can profit. So the Best Bets membership shows you how to do that, and I'll be posting all my bets in there all season long. So definitely check it out. Thanks guys for watching. Good luck with your bets on the weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.